Good afternoon, everyone. So in today's video, we're going to expand on the topic of putting data into Excel for the purposes of analysis. And we do have a previous video that we did on this that showed you how to generate a query that just gave you a straight up customer listing and then to dump that into Excel and work with that in Excel. So how's this video different? Well, two things today. Number one, I'm going to go a little bit farther with the query and I'm going to show you how to expand the rows of the query to include all of the individual contacts under a customer file, because if you just run sort of the basic customer listing, you'll just get sort of the name of the business partner or customer name and the primary default contact on the file and their email address. But if there are other contacts in that file, it won't return in the result because it's just giving you the default. So I'm going to show you how to join it in with the contact table that allows you to essentially then have 4 or 5 lines if there's 4 or 5 contacts per business partner. Also, what we're going to quickly show you today is how to live connect Microsoft Excel into Business One. So I'm going to just back Excel off. We just did a test earlier, so we'll fire that up from scratch. All right. So let's take a quick run at it. So as before, if you've watched the previous video, I think we published it a year or so ago. What we did was we began by discovering the data tables that are underneath the business partner master record. So if we have the business partner master record open and we go to View, System Information, and you hover your cursor over one of the fields, you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner the name of the database table, the 4-letter abbreviation, so OCRD, and card name. Are you looking in the bottom left-hand corner? Sorry, because as I move my cursor over different fields, you see the field names change. But it's all from OCRD. Now, the other trick to know about this is that when we have a data object in find mode, we don't necessarily have all of the tabs in the field exposed. Like, where's the contact tab for the business partner? Well, the contact tab only becomes present in either add new mode or sort of view existing record mode. So a lot of times when you're trying to discover the database table abbreviation and field name, you want to not be in find mode. You want to be in sort of view existing record or add new mode, because all of the tabs in the fields will be exposed. All right, so that's trick number one. So as per the previous video, if you watched it, we're discovering that the business partner master data table is OCRD, but there are other data tables in the database that are linked to it, and the contact person table is an example of that. So if we cursor over the contact ID, we'll see that the table name, the 4-letter abbreviated table name, is not OCRD, it's OCPR, and that's the contact record table. So those two tables are related to each other, but they're not the same. So if we write a query that's just grabbing everything from OCRD, we don't get everything from the contact table. We have to include the contact table as well. And code junkies or hackers or whatever we want to call them, they know that when you include more than one table in a query and you put them together, that's called a join. So if you've ever heard that terminology before, we do an inner join or an outer join or what have you. Now the good news is that Business One sort of knows how to do joins automatically through its query generator. So we're not having to worry about how to write a join. So we're going to type OCRD and we're going to hit tab. So this is the same query as we got to before. You can see all of the fields are exposed. Now some of these fields we could actually drag and drop over here and it would create a join, but we also know the table name for the contact record table, and that's OCPR. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to manually type it in that field. I'm going to hit tab, and you can see what happened over here. So this is where the data is coming from. This is the query generator, just like the previous video, is starting to build our SQL statement, our SQL syntax. And it's saying, well, we're going to select and we haven't chosen what to select with. If we leave it blank, it says select star, select asterisk, which means select all, like grab all of these fields and put it into one. So select, we could just say select splat, but we'll just leave it blank and it'll automatically say select all. From, and here's where the data is coming from the OCRD table, and then we nickname that T0, and then Business One Query Generator automatically says there's an inner join to OCPR, and it does the joining code. So you don't have to know how to write that. SAP Business One Query Generator does it for you. So if we hit execute, what it'll give us is it'll give us the combined query of the two tables together. All right, so there's our query syntax, our query statement right there. Okay. Now that we have that, so instead of, in the previous video we showed you how to, of course, just hit the Excel button and dump this result into Excel. What we're going to do a little bit differently today is we're going to live connect Excel to the database to run the query. Now, two things. I want to say a couple of things. Number one, you have to be, you should probably be somebody with system administrator level knowledge and credentials, of course, to do this. What we're doing is read only, so we're not writing to the database. But I will say that what we're doing is not necessarily without any impact. So what I mean by that is if the query is big and the amount of data in your database is lots, like let's say you've been running Business One for 10 years and you do 50 invoices a day, and you wrote this same kind of very open query on just pull me everything from the OINV invoice table. That query might return hundreds of thousands of rows. That's going to slow down Business One for a period of time, and it could slow it down for all of your users. So just take care with this. I'm running this in a demo system, so there aren't too many rows that it's returning. There's only 38 rows. That's a very, very, very small query. So if you find that what you're wanting is a query that returns massive amounts of data, you may want to narrow its range. And that's when you probably want a little bit more know-how when it comes to query design. Like maybe we use this query generator to set conditions like where the data is in a certain date range or what have you. So you'd want to do a little more learning on that and query formation. We'll come back to this query though, and I'm just going to grab this statement, this SQL-like statement. Now we're actually in the Hana version of Business One, so we still kind of call this a SQL statement, although it's Hana SQL. It's very similar to Microsoft SQL, by the way, if you're curious. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to just paste our query to Notepad. Now what we're going to do is we're going to crack open Excel. Okay, now Excel has what I think in the old school we used to call them Obdc connectors. Obdc is a kind of connection protocol. Probably still called Obdc, although some of the terminology used these days you might hear terms like Excel Power Query. So what do I mean by that? If you open Excel, you click on the Data tab, you can see that there's a whole bunch of ways to sort of get data from various sources. And if you drop this initial button down, this Get Data, so you can pull data in from other file sources, so another workbook, a text file, an XML file. You have to be pretty good at it to do some of this stuff. But you also notice that you can pull data from, say, online services, so on and so forth. We're actually interested in from database. Now, I'm using Excel on a computer that is on the same local area network as my SAP Business One database, and that's important. If you're working on a computer or a remote desktop instance that allows you to launch the SAP Business One client, and that's in the same desktop as Excel, then you're able to do this. If you're using Excel remotely, there's a little more of a trick to doing this. You might need a VPN, but you essentially have to be on the same local area network as your SAP Business One database server in order to pull this off. Okay, and there's some data security concerns too if you're doing this over the internet. So it certainly asks us. Now, You can connect to a SQL Server database, which you would do if you're running the SQL version of Business One. In our case, we're running the HANA version of Business One. The procedures are very, very similar, either SQL or HANA. So what we're doing, what Excel is doing, is it's asking us for where the server is. I'm just going to back up and I'm going to show you that this looks somewhat similar in SQL. Okay, so I'm going to run the Sql connection. So here's where we would put the server host name or IP address, typically. Here's where we would put the database name. And then if we drop down advanced options, here's where we put that SQL statement. Let's back up and let's do it for HANA. And there's only one small difference in doing this for HANA versus SQL, and that is when we do this for HANA, we have to start off by writing the schema name, the database, the company name in the database first before we specify. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so where do we get this information on server? Here's where we get it. Go into SAP Business One, go into administration and choose company. And what this will tell you is it will tell you the database host name and schema name. Okay, so schema actually means database in HANA speak. So when we say database here, what we actually mean is the database name in this field. Okay, so we need this IP address here, this 10.0.4.113. We don't need this part, at least not at this time. So that's the port number. And then we also need the database name. Okay, so let's jump back over to SAP HANA. What was that? 10.0.3.114? No, 10.0.4.113. Okay, 10.0.4.113. Okay, and you can see that there's a thing for port over here, so we're not going to worry about that. I don't really. This is a new thing for me, by the way, being able to choose between multi-container and single container. I would imagine what this means is maybe we can choose between different databases. Not sure. Okay, but we specify the database name in the statement. Now, I'm going to go back to the statement on my notepad, and I'm going to grab it and I'm going to copy. I'm going to paste it over into this window. Now, if we were using the Sql connector, this would be fine. We would be done here. Okay, we could just put this in and click OK and it'll load. But if we do this with the HANA, it's going to throw an error. What we need to do is we need to append the schema name, so SBO demo CA dot OCRD before any table name, and I believe we have to do it here too. So we need to do it before the second table that it's joined to. Okay, so let's click OK. All right, now the last thing we need to do is we need to enter our database credentials. So Excel gives you two options. Allows you to, like if you're using the Windows credentials, like sort of in a single sign-on way to sign on to your database, you could do it here. That's not typically the way this works. Usually you want to click to database, and then you want to provide your database name and password. Now, best practice here is that you create a different profile than the root or the super user profile on your database. So if you're used to this, you'll know what I'm talking about. Like in SQL, we're talking about the SA user and the SA user password. You know, strictly speaking, you could put that here, but it is best practice to create a second SQL user that's maybe just read only. And maybe even with limited security, that it's always a better idea, if you know what I mean. In this case, we're doing this on a demo system, so I'm just going to use the sort of the root user credentials, which in this case is in a HANA system, it's usually system is the username. Okay, I'm going to enter my super secret password. Now, I don't need an Ssl certificate here, but you can see that Microsoft does now, and I believe this is new. They do allow sort of an extended ability to provide for a security certificate, like an SSL certificate, which is nice. Like if we were connecting to this system over the interweb and this IP and this port was exposed over the internet, we could potentially wrap around a security certificate around it. For any of you out there that sort of gets and understands what I'm talking about, it means that, you know, in order to connect this to this service, you need a security cert, which is a good thing if it's exposed over the interweb. In this case, we're not actually making the data connection over the internet. It's all within a local area network, so we're okay. Okay, so I'm going to hit connect now that I've provided the credentials. All right, and it's given me a error, and usually it's because I haven't done the syntax quite correctly. So SBO demo CA. So we'll just take a second here. T0. Sometimes there's extra spaces where there shouldn't be. I'm not sure that that's the case here, but we'll give it a try. I wonder if the multi-container system is throwing it. I think it was single container when I tried this the first time. Again, this is relatively new on the Hana connector side, so I'm not 100% certain about that yet. So let's give that a shot. And it looks like that was successful. So there you go. Don't use the multi-container, use the single container. I'm not quite sure what that means. If I go ahead and I load this, now what I'm getting here is I'm getting the same query that we produced in Business One, right? This query that we produced in the query generator and that we ran and executed. We've now got that query executing in Excel, and we have it live linked. So what I can do is I can go ahead and I can save this to wherever I save it. Let's say Documents. And of course it wants to think about that. Can't reach the folder. Let's just try this again, shall we? Okay, there we go. So we're going to say this is the contact list query. We'll save it as an Excel workbook. All right, and you can see that there's actually more than one row for the same business partner. Now, why is that? The reason is because there are two contact records on MaxiTech, and this query is essentially returning one row per contact, regardless of how many, there's one business instance of the business partner record for MaxiTech and River, but there are two contacts. Okay, so if we scroll to the right here, we'll see after the main query, which should end, you can see there's a lot of columns when you select everything. But once you get here in this query to about NG or NH, here's where the contact record starts again. You can see that we've got Amanda Costner, Louis Bierman, Luke Hardy. These were River Inc. and so forth. So that gives you a complete list of contacts, and then you can filter and you can sort based on your various criteria. You could throw this into a pivot table and you could group those. Do whatever you would like. Now, one last thing. So let's see here. MaxiTech has two contacts. Let's just try something fun for a second. Let's back up. I just want to prove to you that this will actually work. So MaxiTech is actually one of its contacts. Let's just say that this person actually has a name. We'll say Gordon Dufour. I totally made that name up. All right, I'm going to hit update on Gordon Dufour, and I'm also going to define one more. So let's say Sheena Easton. Absolutely awesome percussionist. Yeah, we'll just put a contact ID there. Okay, so I added a new contact as well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to that Excel file, the contact list query. We're going to pop it open again. Anytime, because we did a direct connection to the database in Excel instead of just a dump in Chase, anytime this table reloads again, it's going to refresh that data. We're going to say enable content, or anytime you go to data and hit refresh all, it should refresh the records here. Now I see that we did add more to MaxiTech. Let's see why we're not getting that now. Okay, it's actually shuffled MaxiTech to the bottom. Let's just sort MaxiTech here. Okay, there you go. Now you can see MaxiTech has 3 records. All right, 1, 2, and 3. So that extra contact we added is there. And if I shift to the scroll to the right, scroll to the right, scroll to the right, I have to go past the OCRD table columns first. Okay, that's our first query. But you can see now we've got Gordon Dufour, Amanda Costner, Sheena Easton, totally updated in Excel. So you can give this Excel sheet to somebody else. Now, as far as connecting to the database, one last thing to keep in mind, you're supposed to be a licensed Business One user in order to connect to the database and pull data in this way. So if you've got your controller or your head of marketing or whatever, as long as they've got a Business One license and they're making this connection, then everything's on the level. Hope you found this informative. Thanks for your attention on this video. Catch you in the next one.